Hello everybody! This is Sanran Oneko, waking up from my nap to greet the world for the day. And by greet, I mean present to you all my attempt to rewrite Season 2 of the One Piece live action into a better adaptation that hopefully won't contain the negative hallmarks of being a Netflix show, and still be faithful to the original story while keeping budget and technology constraints in mind as much as possible. So I'll basically be reworking the story to better match the manga and anime, but still have elements from the live action because it did have good ideas that just didn't land because of poor execution. Anyway, that's enough procrastinating now, so let's begin. For episode 1, we open on the Straw Hat guys relaxing while Nami is stressing out because they need to restock their supplies ASAP. Zoro points out an island in the distance and Nami checks her maps before grinning. She says if they spot that island, it means they're approaching the Grand Line, because the island is where Logtown is, the town where Gold D. Roger was born and killed. Luffy is dead set on going there and they set course for the island. We cut to the crew walking into town before splitting up to do their own thing. Sanji finds a nice elephant tuna, which is the last one in stock, because Baratier bought most of them for a new dish, which turns out to be the exact same dish Sanji created back in Season 1. He smiles in fond exasperation and buys the tuna. Usopp gets some nice goggles and looks down at his change, then over to a nearby phone booth. After a beat, he nods to himself and goes to make a call. Nami happily carries bags full of clothes, and stops at a table where she finds an atlas of the East Blue, the same book she stole as a kid, which makes her smile nostalgically. Luffy is completely lost until he runs into a guy who tries to pickpocket him, only to get mad when he realizes Luffy has nothing to steal. Instead of getting upset at the pickpocket attempt, Luffy asks for directions, which catches the guy so off guard he offers to take Luffy to his destination, which Luffy thanks him for. He starts walking away and the guy follows him with a bamboozled expression. And Zoro strolls down the street, pretending he's not lost. He runs into a woman who trips and loses her glasses. He helps her up and is taken aback by how much she looks like a grown-up Kuina. The woman thanks him, and Zoro mumbles no problem before fleeing in a flustered panic to the nearby sword shop. The owner thinks poorly of him due to his low funds and tries to swindle his sword off of him, but Zoro doesn't fall for it. The woman from before shows up and starts rambling about the history and value of Zoro's sword, stopping further swindle attempts. She laments about how so many swords are in the hands of bad people, like bounty hunters and pirates. She then introduces herself as Tashigi and recommends him a sword that he can tell is cursed. The owner warns him not to get it, but Zoro takes that as a challenge and tests his resolve against the blade. He wins. The owner is shocked. Then he scrambles to get Zoro another high-quality blade, letting him take the swords for free while apologizing for his deceit. We then cut back to Luffy, who's at the execution platform with the pickpocket. He quietly takes in the history when a voice suddenly calls out to him. He turns around to see it's Alvida, but doesn't realize it's her because he doesn't remember her. This pisses her off and she swings her mace at him. He dodges and punches her, but his fist slides off her skin. She boasts that she ate the slip fruit, so everything will slide right off her. Luffy goes to punch her again but suddenly finds himself restrained. A pair of disembodied hands fly out from behind him and reattach to Buggy, who walks up next to Alvida with his crew. He announces to the crowd that it's time for Luffy's public execution, where he gets the honor of dying in the same place as the Pirate King. We then cut over to Marine Captain Smoker, who's in his office when a Marine barges in to inform him of the commotion. He sighs heavily before leaving to take care of it. While walking, he runs into a little girl and she drops her ice cream on him. Her dad fearfully apologizes for her, but Smoker waves it off, giving the girl money to get herself 5 scoops. She happily thanks him and leaves. It's then that Tashigi appears and reports for duty. The two make their way to the platform area. Meanwhile, the Straw Hat crew meet up and wonder where Luffy is, only to find out through fast-spreading gossip that a pirate in a straw hat is about to be executed by other pirates. They all pale and immediately book it to the platform area while a storm rolls in. By the time they reach the platform, they see a kneeling Luffy with a sword to his neck courtesy of Buggy. Buggy asks if Luffy has any last words, and Luffy declares he's gonna be king of the pirates. The crowd reacts in disbelief, cause he's about to die and he's really gonna say something like that? Then Luffy sees his crew and nonchalantly asks for help, so they spring into action and fight Buggy's crew. But the crew takes too long and Buggy raises his blade up. Luffy stops his struggling and smiles at his crew, saying he's a goner before laughing, which makes his crew panic and Smoker, who just arrived on scene, pale. Before Buggy brings his blade down, lightning strikes the platform. When the smoke clears, Buggy is down, the platform is destroyed, and Luffy is free and clear of injury, shocking everyone. Luffy makes a break for it before anyone can react, and his crew runs after him. Tashigi asks Smoker what they should do, but he interrupts her, asking if she's ever seen a pirate laugh before their death. She says no because people always tremble in fear when faced with death. Smoker says Luffy laughed, and that 20 years ago, another man laughed in that same spot. Who, Tashigi asks. Gold D. Roger, the king of the pirates, Smoker responds, now visibly agitated. He then says he's not gonna let Luffy get away and he and Tashigi move out. We then cut to the Straw Hats who were separated during their escape. Zoro gets intercepted by Tashigi and the two fight. When Zoro easily wins, she gets pissed and starts spouting the same things Kuina once lamented about, which pisses him off. He tells her to get over herself, that his rival was a girl who would have easily become the strongest swordsman in the world if she hadn't died, so he's gonna make sure he can achieve their shared dream. Tashigi retorts that won't happen if she stops him first, because swords like his don't deserve to be in the hands of people like him. That it's her dream to collect them all and ensure no bad person will ever use such blades again. Zoro dares her to try before fleeing. We then cut to Luffy and Sanji who run into Smoker. They fight, but Smoker overpowers them with his smoke fruit abilities. Before Smoker can take out Luffy, a hooded tattooed man stops him, allowing Luffy and Sanji to escape. We then cut to the ship where Nami and Usopp are already preparing for departure when the others finally get on board. They immediately set sail and Smoker is forced to watch them disappear into the horizon. We then jump forward a bit to see Tashigi nursing a drink in a bar when she's approached by an unknown woman who wants to recruit her to Baroque Works, a secret organization that can help her achieve her dream. Tashigi refuses, not wanting to resort to shady tactics because it would make her no better than the people she's trying to free the blades from. The woman shrugs, unbothered by her rejection, and tells her to keep the card before leaving. Smoker soon arrives, saying they have new orders, but sees Tashigi frowning severely. He asks what's up, and Tashigi says it's nothing, crumpling the card and leaving it on the counter. She asks what the orders are, and Smoker says it's to capture the Straw Hats at any cost, and the episode comes to an end. For episode 2, we open on the crew relaxing after successfully escaping from the Marines. Nami tells them to stop slacking off though, because they're approaching the Red Line, which is the only way to get to the Grand Line. She explains the mechanics of the Red Line, but nobody believes her, because how the heck do you sail up a mountain? Then they arrive at said mountain and realize she wasn't making it up, before preparing for a bumpy ride. As they go up, the steering mechanism breaks, so Luffy has to intervene so they don't crash. They manage to reach the peak and enjoy the view for a beat before the ship goes hurtling down to the other side. Everyone's shouting in excitement, but it quickly turns into terror when they see a giant whale blocking their path. Luffy attacks the whale to get it to move, but gets swept onto a nearby cliff instead. He watches helplessly as the whale swallows his ship and friends whole. He tries to fight the whale, but his hits only agitate it. Suddenly, a syringe hits the whale and injects something that makes it fall asleep and sink beneath the waves. Luffy looks over to see where the syringe came from and spots an old man by a lighthouse. We then cut to the crew lighting some torches and looking around in trepidation, wondering how the hell they're gonna get out of this mess. We cut back to Luffy, who's now at the lighthouse and meets the old man, a lighthouse keeper named Crocus who tells him the whale is Laboon. Luffy asks how he can get Laboon to release his friends, but Crocus says it's a lost cause. His friends were most likely dead by now, Luffy doesn't believe that and has the utmost faith that they're still alive. Crocus grumbles that he's just like Laboon, and Luffy asks what he means. As Crocus explains Laboon's backstory, we enter a flashback sequence starting with a baby Laboon playing together with a singing pirate crew. The pirates befriend Crocus, who warns them that they can't take Laboon further into the Grand Line because he's too young. So they ask him to take care of the whale for them and promises to come back after circumnavigating the world. The flashback ends with Crocus saying they never returned and are most likely dead. Luffy looks over to where Laboon sank in contemplation. We then cut to the crew who are trying to figure out how to get out of the whale. Zoro comes up with a dumb idea he insists on doing, so Nami has to rely on Usopp and Sanji to repair the ship and find a way to get out. Usopp and Sanji find the parts they need but run into a man who attacks them, though the battle is short as the man ends up trapping himself. Meanwhile, a woman attacks Nami, but Nami manages to dispatch her with some last-minute help from Zoro. The crew then interrogate the two attackers, who Zoro reveals to be agents from Baroque Works, a group of bounty hunters and assassins. How does he know that? A Mr. Seven tried to recruit him and it didn't end well, he says, tapping his sword. They all understand the implication he's making. Nami demands to know why the now introduced Mr. Nine and Miss Wednesday attack them. Miss Wednesday says they want to take their ship and log pose and get out of the whale. The crew is confused. What's a log pose? Miss Wednesday laughs in disbelief, because how can they traverse the Grand Line and not know what a log pose is? Suddenly their surroundings shake and Miss Wednesday warns them to brace themselves. We then cut back to Luffy, who asks Crocus why Laboon rams the mountain. Crocus explains that Laboon's old crew actually fled the Grand Line and left Laboon behind, but Laboon couldn't accept that they abandoned him and rams the mountain, hoping to break it so he can see his friends who must be waiting for him on the other side. That's why he puts Laboon to sleep, because he'll keep ramming the mountain until he dies. Suddenly, their surroundings shake, and they rush over to see Laboon awake and ramming the mountain again. Crocus rushes to get the medicine ready, but it's no use, because the dose wasn't high enough. So Luffy rushes to Laboon despite Crocus's protests. Luffy lands on a nearby cliff and tries to get Laboon's attention, but the whale ignores him. He punches Laboon, but he still ignores him. So Luffy starts singing a sea shanty, and that gets Laboon's attention. As the shanty continues, Laboon calms down as he remembers happier times. When the shanty ends, Luffy tells Laboon he understands what it's like to get left behind. So that's why he's gonna make Laboon a promise. A promise to come back and sing songs again because Laboon is his friend. This promise makes Laboon really happy. Then Luffy asks if he can free his friends who were swallowed, please and thank you. Laboon makes a noise of agreement and opens his mouth to spit the ship out. We jump ahead a bit and see the ship is ready to sail. Crocus gives Nami a log pose as a gift and explains the mechanics behind it. Everyone thanks him for all the help he's given. He just waves them off, telling them to leave already so he can go back to enjoying his little slice of paradise. Down below, Luffy finishes painting the Straw Hat logo on Laboon, telling him that he can't do anything that could wipe it off because it's a sign of their promise. Laboon trills in agreement. With that settled, the Straw Hats sail off into the sunset as Laboon and Crocus watch them go. We then end the episode on Crocus wondering aloud if they're the pirates they'd finally been waiting for as he smiles at an old photo of him and Goldie Roger. For episode 3, we open on Zoro doing image training against Mihawk, continually persisting despite constantly losing. Then we cut to Sanji and Usopp, who are doing their own thing while keeping an eye on Mr. Nine and Miss Wednesday. Nami keeps coming in and out, commenting on the extreme weather changes. Mr. Nine and Miss Wednesday are unimpressed by their reactions, but the crew could care less about what they think. Eventually, Luffy and Nami come in and they discuss what to do with their prisoners. Luffy looks at them for a beat before he releases them, surprising everyone. Nami tries to stop him because they're bad guys, but Luffy doesn't think so. His gut is telling him they're good people, which makes Mr. Nine laugh at his naivety, while Miss Wednesday remains strangely silent. Everyone else just sighs and goes with it. We then cut to Luffy bringing Miss Wednesday some food, and she tells him she's not going to give in to whatever strange interrogation tactic this is. Luffy says it's not an interrogation. He just thought she'd be hungry. Miss Wednesday is silent for a beat before asking why Luffy is being so nice to them. Luffy just smiles and says he knows she's a good person because his gut says so. Miss Wednesday looks down at her food with a torn expression. Then their attention gets drawn to the outside where they hear Usopp shout "Land ho!" Luffy runs out and joins the others at the railing where they see an island full of giant cactus in the distance. Then they all turn to Mr. 9 and Miss Wednesday, who thank them for the ride before jumping ship. And everyone's like, "Oh no." Well, that's one problem taken care of. And they prepare to make landfall. The crew walks into town and are surprised by the warm welcome they get for being pirates. The mayor greets them and explains they love pirates here at Whiskey Peak, and invites them to join tonight's festivities. The crew gladly agrees and everyone parties hard. Nami gambles like there's no tomorrow. Zoro downs beer like it's water and he's dying of thirst. Sanji is willingly led away by some pretty women. Usopp regales a captive audience with his tall tales. And Luffy eats everything in sight. Meanwhile, Mr. 9 and Miss Wednesday arrive on the island and meet up with the mayor, who's revealed to be Mr. 8. They prepare a plan to take out the Straw Hats and capture Luffy for his bounty. Back inside the bar, Nami, Zoro, and Luffy step out, with Nami going to explore, Zoro to do his business, and Luffy to eat some sweets at the town's bakery. Nami comes across the dead bodies of a pirate crew she recognizes from bounty posters. She gets spotted and attacked by a bounty hunter but manages to take him out. Zoro gets ambushed by 2 bounty hunters and swiftly dispatches them. Nami finds him in the aftermath and they realize the island is a death trap for pirates. Zoro goes back in to get Sanji and Usopp while Nami goes to find Luffy. We then jump over to Luffy, who's eating a bunch of pies when Mr. 8 finds him. The two chat a little, and Luffy tells Mr. 8 that he's a good guy. He can feel it in his gut. Mr. 8 is glad to hear that, but it makes what he's about to do really regrettable. He pulls out his saxophone and plays it as Miss Wednesday appears and does a mesmerizing dance that knocks Luffy out. We then cut back to the bar where Zoro is greeted by Mr. 9, who sends 100 bounty hunters after him. While fighting, Zoro is accompanied by an imaginary Mihawk who taunts, encourages, and advises him, and his fighting style slowly but surely improves with each bounty hunter he defeats. Once he defeats all the bounty hunters, he finds Sanji and Usopp and frees them before going out to confront Mr. 9. Back at the bakery, Mr. 8 and Miss Wednesday are in a heated discussion about next steps and how they're going to get off the island. Miss Wednesday suggests stealing the Straw Hat's ship just as Luffy wakes up. He wonders what's going on and why the mayor and Miss Wednesday are talking like they know each other. Neither one wants to answer, so they run before he can get up. Luffy goes after them, wanting answers, though he doesn't need to go far as their escape is cut off by Miss Valentine and Mr. 5, who have arrived to kill them because they're actually spies, and their true identities are the Alabasta head guard Igaram and Royal Princess Vivi, which shocks Nami and Luffy, who've just arrived on scene. We then cut back to Zoro, who's now fighting Mr. 9 with Miss Monday joining in partway through. But Zoro manages to take them both down before meeting up with Sanji and Usopp. They rush off to find the others who are trying and failing to escape from Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine. After they duck for cover, Igaram pleads for the crew to help Vivi get back to Alabasta. Nami doesn't want to because of the potential danger, but Luffy agrees. Then they're caught in an explosion that severely injures Igaram. He says he'll buy them time to escape, but Vivi doesn't want to leave him. He insists she has to for the good of their country. He uses a handkerchief to wipe away her tears, and she grabs a hold of it and his hand. But he pulls his hand away, leaving her to clutch the handkerchief as he steps back. Nami pulls Vivi away, and she can only watch helplessly as Igaram steps out into the open to confront Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine. The crew makes a run for the ship as Igram shoots at Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine, though he quickly runs out of steam and bullets. Mr. 5 launches the final blow, and we cut back to the crew and Vivi boarding the ship when an explosion occurs. Vivi immediately knows what it means and cries out for Igram. Nami grabs hold of her before she can run back, and shouts for the guys to get the ship sailing, which they scramble to do. Vivi can only cry and wail in Nami's arms as Whiskey Peak slowly disappears from view. We jump forward to the next day where Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine confront Mr. 9 for his failure, and he taunts them right back about their own. Miss Valentine demands Mr. 9 give up information on Vivi, but he refuses, because even if she lied about who she was, he'd never betray a partner. In a fit of anger, Miss Valentine kills Mr. 9. We then cut to Vivi, who's taking a moment to mourn for Igram, looking down at his handkerchief as she vows to make sure they both return home. She ties the handkerchief around her hair, then goes to speak with the Straw Hats. She tells them that Baroque Works wants to take over Alabasta for some unknown reason, and knows they're not obligated to help her but still pleads for their assistance in getting home. Before anyone can answer, the unknown woman from episode 1 appears and the episode ends. For episode 4, we open right where we left off as the unknown woman greets Vivi and the Straw Hats. Vivi demands to know what the woman, Miss All Sunday, wants. Miss All Sunday says she doesn't want anything, but would like to give them a little warning. She tells them the next island, Little Garden, is dangerous, but she can help them bypass it if they promise to hide out on a quiet island for a few days. Vivi wants to refuse because she has to get to Alabasta ASAP, but can't because she doesn't want the Straw Hats to risk their lives if they help her. The crew is also torn because while it'd be nice to not have to deal with a dangerous island, the quiet island could also be a trap. In the end, Luffy makes a decision by taking the offered eternal log pose and crushing it in his hand, telling Miss All Sunday to get lost. She smiles, amused by his decision. "Don't say I didn't warn you," she says before vanishing. Luffy then tells Vivi they're gonna help her get to Alabasta, and the rest of the crew agrees. Vivi thanks them, but quietly hopes she hasn't just put them all in danger. We cut to the Straw Hats arriving at Little Garden and disembarking to explore while the log pose resets. Sanji and Zoro go on a hunting challenge. Luffy goes to explore, with Vivi joining to distract herself from everything that's happened. And Usopp and Nami stay behind. They wonder why the island is called Little Garden, only to get their answer in the form of a smiling giant who invites them to lunch before grabbing them. We then cut to Sanji and Zoro, who are arguing over whose kill is the biggest. The argument ends in a stalemate, so Sanji starts butchering the meat while Zoro goes to find more beasts to kill. We then cut back to Nami and Usopp, who are now in a cave and very scared, as the giant prepares a meal. Nami tells Usopp to distract the giant while she goes to get help. Usopp protests, but eventually gives in, and starts telling the giant about the great adventures of Captain Usopp, as Nami slips away. But she doesn't get far, as she hears Usopp scream and comes running back, only to find Usopp practicing his war cry with the giant's help. Nami's like, "WTF is going on?" Usopp tells her it's all good, and the giant, Brogy, has amazing stories to tell. Brogy is also impressed by Usopp, and the two start swapping stories while Nami is still utterly confused, asking if Brogy was going to eat them. Brogy says he's not, wondering how she could think that. He's a giant, not a savage. Nami apologizes, and Brogy's like water under the bridge. It's been years since he had guests, so he might have been a bit overzealous when inviting them. Anyways, food's ready now, so let's eat. And Nami cautiously rejoins them as Brogy tells stories about Elbaf. We then cut to an excited Luffy and concerned VV riding on the back of a dinosaur. Their ride is unexpectedly cut short by a giant, who introduces himself as Dory, and invites them to join him for lunch, which Luffy eagerly accepts much to Vivi's dismay. We then cut to Luffy and Vivi at Dory's camp where Luffy and Dory are chowing down and chatting. though Dory notices Vivi isn't eating and asks if she'd like something else. Vivi assures him the food's fine. She's just not that hungry. Dory asks if she lost someone, and she wonders how he knew. He explains that he's a warrior, and knows war and loss like the back of his hand, so he can understand her pain. He asks if she'd be willing to speak about the one she lost. Vivi hesitates for a beat before doing so, softly crying as she tells them about Igaram. Dory offers to burn some food as an offering to him, and Vivi is thankful for the gesture. They set everything up and watch the flames burn away the offered food. We briefly cut back to Zoro, who's still searching for his next kill, when he gets distracted by movement. He draws his blades as childish giggling fills his ears, but he unfortunately doesn't spot whoever's out there before it's too late. We then cut back to Nami and Usopp, who ask Brogy how long he'd been here. Brogy says it's been 100 years, and he spent that entire time fighting with his rival. Then a volcano erupts, worrying Nami and Usopp. But Brogy assures them it's tame and serves as a signal to duel. He offers them a ride to go watch the duel. Usopp eagerly agrees and follows Brogy out of the cave. Nami lags behind a bit when she hears childish giggling, and before she knows it, she's suddenly struck by whatever it was. We then jump back to Zoro, who's cutting fruit and laughing like a maniac when Sanji finds him. He asks what Zoro's doing, and Zoro responds in a manner that feels forced, like he's trying to fight against something. Sanji just thinks the Marimo has finally gone mad and leaves, saying he'll be on the ship waiting for when he finally comes to his senses. Zoro tries to respond but keeps cutting fruit and laughing instead, while trying and failing to snap himself out of it. A branch breaks, and he looks over to see who it is when we jump over to the others who reunited as Brogy and Dory settle them on a nearby cliff to watch their duel. As the two giants exchange pleasantries and ale, Usopp and Luffy wait with eager anticipation, while Vivi expresses concern over Nami's lethargic behavior. Soon the giants begin their duel, and Usopp is completely in awe at the sight. He wants to be a brave warrior just like them, and Luffy says he'll become one for sure. Then Brogy suddenly stumbles and smoke comes out of his nose. Usopp realizes something's wrong and tries to stop the match, but Brogy makes eye contact and subtly shakes his head. He's going to keep fighting no matter what. Usopp is stunned as he watches Brogy push through and keep fighting. Unfortunately, Dory lands the finishing blow and Brogy goes down. Dory cheers at his victory, but is cut short when Usopp shouts that the match was rigged, that the ale Brogy drank was messed with. Dory gets upset because who would dare do such a thing? It's then that Usopp has the terrible thought that they might not be the only ones on the island. A voice tells them he's right, and they all look to see Mr. Five and Miss Valentine smirking as they hold Nami and Vivi hostage. We then end the episode with a cut to a wax house in the middle of the jungle and see a man with a 3 on his head sipping a cup of tea and smiling in anticipation. For episode 5, we open right where we left off with Miss Valentine and Mr. Five holding Nami and Vivi hostage while in a tense standoff with Luffy, Usopp, and Dory. Miss Valentine reveals that they were the ones who spiked the ale and thought Dory would appreciate the assist. Dory doesn't, because there's no honor in a rigged fight. And while he respects Brogy for still fighting, he doesn't respect outsiders for meddling, and goes to attack them. Mr. Five counters with a bombardment of booger bombs, which are enough to knock Dory down and out, as he's still injured from the duel. Luffy goes to attack, but Miss Valentine floats up and drops down in front of him, saying she hopes he likes tea, before whacking him with her umbrella and sending him flying across the island. She then smiles at a panicking Usopp, says a cheerful toodles, and stomps the ground, making the cliff collapse and sending him tumbling down. We then cut to Luffy, who lands heavily on a beach where he meets Miss Goldenweek, who invites him to join her for tea, but he can't because he's gotta go save his friends. This displeases her, so she smacks some paint on him and he easily gives in to her demands. We then cut to Vivi, Zoro, and Nami, who are brought before Mr. 3, who's just finished putting together a large wax statue. Mr. 3 greets them, and is happy he'll get to kill a pirate, the swordsman who killed Mr. 7, and the Princess of Alabasta in the name of art. Off that troubling threat, we jump over to Usopp, who's getting up from his sudden tumble and falls into despair because how the hell is he supposed to save his friends? It's then that Brogy stirs and reveals he's alive. Usopp is super happy but wonders how. Brogy points out that 100 years is a long time to be using the same weapon. He then encourages Usopp to save his friends because he's a brave warrior. But Usopp admits he was lying, that he's not a brave warrior but a scared coward. Brogy doesn't look surprised by this admission, and tells Usopp that bravery is not action in the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. His pep talk inspires Usopp to be brave, and Brogy nods in approval, saying he'll follow when he's recovered more and Dory is awake. He wishes Usopp luck as he departs to go save his friends. We then jump over to Sanji, who's on the ship but no one's returned yet. So he goes back into the jungle to search, wondering where they all might have gone. Then we cut to Vivi, Zoro, and Nami, who are now stuck to the wax statue. The Baroque agents argue amongst themselves, because Mr. 3 is taking too long to kill the Straw Hats, and Mr. 3 doesn't want to listen to the agents who failed to kill them the first time. While they're distracted, Vivi uses her coat to wipe the paint off of Zoro. After some confusion, she gets him to use a sheathed blade to wipe the paint off of Nami. The agents soon realize they're back to normal, so Mr. 3 gets a statue going, saying they'll be covered in wax and suffocate to death. Vivi begins to lose hope of escaping, but Zoro refuses to give up, and he'll cut his own legs off if he has to. But before he can, Mr. 3 covers them in wax, because he doesn't want his art to be dirtied with blood. That doesn't deter Zoro from struggling to escape though, and Vivi and Nami start struggling as well. We then cut to Luffy, who's struggling to break out of Miss Golden Week's emotional roller coaster ride. Eventually, she gets bored of his struggles and puts black paint on him, ordering him to go drown in the ocean. As he walks, she commands him to say he'll never find the One Piece or become king of the pirates, to really break his spirit. Luffy struggles and fails to not speak, but before he can finish, Usopp tackles him into the water, which washes off the paint. Luffy jumps up and shouts that he will become king of the pirates no matter what. Miss Golden Week is pissed, and about to splash them with paint, but Usopp fires a shot at her palette which smacks her in the face. She starts going nuts from all the emotions that are influencing her. Usopp then drags Luffy away from the water so they can go find and save their friends. We then cut to Sanji, who arrives at the wax house and cautiously explores it. He doesn't really find anything useful except an eternal log post to Alabasta. Then a snail transponder rings and he takes a moment to prepare himself before sarcastically answering it, only to freeze when Mr. Zero responds on the other end. We jump back to Usopp and Luffy as they find the others, but they're almost completely encased in wax. Luffy gets mad and attacks Mr. 3, but the agent flees instead of engaging. Usopp tells Luffy to go after Mr. 3 and he'll free their friends. Luffy trusts him to follow through and runs off. Usopp fights Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine, managing to trick them into breaking the wax and freeing everyone despite almost dying to do so. Zoro then swiftly kills Mr. 5 while Nami and Vivi knock out Miss Valentine. Usopp finally relaxes, proud that he was able to act like a brave warrior. We then cut back to Sanji doing his best to trick Mr. Zero. Mr. Zero believes him in the end, but has the Unluckies sent to double check. The Unluckies immediately arrive, and Sanji narrowly escapes getting shot by them. He then fights and kills them before going back on the call. Mr. Zero is suspicious about the fight, but Sanji plays it off as Vivi and the Straw Hats managing to trick him and kill the Unluckies before he finally finished them off. Mr. Zero is quiet for a beat, but then buys what he's selling. He orders him to go to Alabasta before hanging up. Sanji sighs in relief, and collects the Eternal Log Post to Alabasta before leaving. We then jump over to Luffy, who arrives in a clearing filled with statues of Mr. 3. He taunts Luffy, saying he'll never be able to find him before he kills him. But Luffy just looks around for a beat before one-shotting Mr. 3, who can't believe Luffy managed to get him because how? Luffy just says he trusted his gut and that's that. The Straw Hats reunite by the broken wax statue, but their celebratory mood is marred by the fact that it'll take 1 year to reset the lock pose according to the giants who just arrived at the clearing. But Sanji appears with the good news that he convinced Mr. Zero of their deaths, and got an internal log pose to Alabasta. We then cut to the crew on the ship with the giants bidding them farewell and advising them to sail straight ahead no matter what. Luffy and Usopp trust their advice even as a giant sea monster appears in the ship's path. Before it can destroy the ship, the giants unleash strikes that punch a hole directly through the monster, destroying their weapons in the process but allowing the Straw Hats to continue unimpeded. The giants bid farewell again, and the Straw Hats are glad that things finally seem to be working in their favor. But when Nami goes to chart their course, she suddenly collapses, and the episode ends. For episode 6, we open on the crew gathered around Nami, who has a fever that won't stop rising, so they need to find a doctor ASAP. Nami assures them she's fine, and they can keep going to Alabasta as planned, especially since the situation is getting worse. Vivi is confused by what she means, and Nami pulls out a newspaper she'd hidden away, with a headline stating that half of the royal army defected to the rebel army. This devastates Vivi, as millions of her people are gonna die for a senseless war. Nami says this is exactly why they have to get to Alabasta, but nobody wants to do it at the cost of her well-being. Vivi steps outside to think. We then jump ahead a bit to Vivi stepping back inside, and they ask her what she's decided. She agrees that they need to get to Alabasta. Nami nods in approval, but Vivi continues, saying they'll find a doctor first, so Nami will be at her best to chart the fastest course. The guys are relieved, while Nami is surprised. Vivi says she's not going to sacrifice a friend just to get home faster. We fast forward to the ship now approaching a snowy mountainous island. Vivi recognizes the island as Drum Island, which is renowned for its medical knowledge and just what they need for Nami. We cut to the crew walking up to a gated town but are told by the guards to go away. Vivi pleads to be let in so they can get medical care for Nami, but the guards don't trust them because their scouts spotted their ship, so they know they're pirates, and they refuse to let pirates in. The guys start threatening the guards to let them in. Vivi tries to stop them and gets shot in the arm by a trigger-happy guard. Now Luffy really wants to let them have it, but Vivi stops him, saying that a leader can't be so impulsive and must think before they act. She then bows an apology to the guards, and pleads for them to at least send out a doctor to look at their friend. Luffy stares at her for a beat, before also apologizing and saying he was wrong, then bowing as well. The guards stare at them in disbelief for a beat before they decide to let them in. The leader of the town, Dalton, apologizes for what happened and guides them to an inn. He also tells them that there are no more doctors here, and the only one left lives in the castle on top of the highest mountain. Everyone loses hope except for Luffy, who says he'll just climb the mountain then, and goes to tell Nami what's going on. Despite everyone's protests, Luffy only pays attention to Nami, who says she's counting on him, and he promises he won't let her down. Sanji says he'll go with them, and everyone wishes them good luck before they depart. Fast forward a bit, and we see Dalton walking around town with the rest of the crew, and explaining the situation on Drum Island, like how the kingdom was still recovering from a takeover by Blackbeard's pirates. Vivi asks what happened to the king, and Dalton scoffs. King Wapol abandoned the island because the pirates were too strong, and he even took all the doctors with him. This disgusts Vivi, because a ruler is supposed to look after their people, not abandon them the moment it gets hard. Dalton eyes her, wondering if he's met her before, but Vivi plays it off as just having that kind of face, so he lets it go. We then cut to Luffy and Sanji, who begin their arduous climb as a snowstorm rages around them. We then jump back to the others as they try to keep themselves distracted from negative thoughts. Usopp can't stand the silence though, especially with Vivi's fidgeting, and breaks it by asking her about King Wapol. She decides to tell them about the first time they met. We then jump into a flashback of young Vivi eavesdropping on a world leader meeting, where Wapol is dismissive and rude and Vivi's father berates him for his behavior. Then we see Wapol smacking Vivi because of what her father did, but she handles the situation with grace, as Dalton watches the display with awe and shame. She then cries away from prying eyes, with Igaram comforting her, before we're back to the present where Vivi mourns Igaram again. Then she sighs and says she can't just sit here and do nothing. Usopp tells her to have faith, but if she really needs to do something, he's sure the townsfolk would appreciate an extra pair of hands. She smiles gratefully for the suggestion, and leaves with Zoro joining her to help patrol the town. We then cut to the edge of the island where a giant man with a metal mouth steps onto the snowy shores. It's King Wapol, and he's finally returned to take back his throne. A scout spots him and ducks behind the trees. We jump back to the town where the scout runs in to deliver the news of Wapol's return to Dalton. Dalton decides to go deal with Wapol himself and asks the remaining Straw Hats help defend the town if need be, which they agree to. We jump ahead to Wapol and his army marching through the snow, only to be stopped by Dalton, who demands Wapol go away. Wapol refuses, so the two fight, only for Dalton to be defeated by Wapol's munch powers, which he definitely didn't have before he left. Wapol says he got them from a benefactor before landing one last hit on Dalton, knocking him out. We then cut to Luffy and Sanji climbing up the mountain, only for Sanji to lose his grip and fall. Luffy manages to catch him, but not before he smacks against a rock, knocking him unconscious. With grit and determination, Luffy completes the climb, but collapses just as the castle is within reach. He looks up to see a Jolly Roger on top of the castle, before it's obscured by a monster stepping into his view. The episode ends with him pleading for his friends to be saved before he finally passes out. For episode 7, we open on Wapol's army storming into town and throwing Dalton's battered body out into the open for everyone to see. The villagers rush to help him, but the army stops them in their tracks, ordering them to prepare for Wapol's glorious return. They refuse, and prepare to fight with Zoro, Usopp, and Vivi's help. We then jump over to Nami, who's slowly coming to, and finds herself in an unfamiliar place. She sees a small reindeer walking on two legs and calls out to it, startling him into hiding behind a wall and peeking out at her in a comical fashion. She asks if he helped her. He says he did because it's his job, even though he hates humans. Then he runs away. After a beat of confusion, an old woman steps in, introduces herself as Kureha, and explains what happened to Nami and her treatment plan. Nami's like, "Great, I'm feeling better now, so can I go?" But Kureha stops her, saying she'll either leave fully treated or dead, and Nami wisely doesn't protest. Then the reindeer comes running back in due to being chased by Luffy and Sanji, who believe Nami's being eaten by the monster Luffy saw, which they quickly realize isn't the case when they see her completely fine. The reindeer takes his chance to escape. Upon Nami's questioning look, Kureha explains that Chopper, her assistant, is a reindeer that ate the human fruit, so he can do anything a human can, and she taught him how to be a doctor. Luffy eagerly asks if she and Chopper would join their crew. Kureha refuses, but says Chopper might consider it if they can heal the wound in his heart. Nami asks what she means. Kureha explains that Chopper had been an outcast ever since he was born, first because of his blue nose, and then because of his hybrid appearance. He didn't do anything wrong except exist, and has always longed for companionship. So then how did he end up with Kureha? Kureha is silent for a beat, before pulling out a bottle and taking a swig. She tells them to take a seat because it's a long story, and it begins with a man named Hiraluk. We flash back to 6 years ago where we see Mad Dr. Hiraluk running away from an angry mob. After successfully escaping, he runs into Kureha, who calls him a quack and warns him that he'll sooner destroy the kingdom than save it. But here Luke isn't deterred. He will cure the weary hearts of the people. Kureha shrugs. It's his bed to lie in. Then she makes herself scarce because the angry mob is back. Here Luke successfully escapes again, only to find a giant monster bleeding out a few feet away from his hiding spot. He approaches the monster to help, but the monster sees his gun and smacks him aside, before trying to crawl away. But here Luke is undeterred. He throws his gun away and strips out of his clothes to prove he's not going to hurt the monster, who looks completely baffled before passing out from blood loss. We then cut to the monster, now in his small form, waking up in Hero Luke's home and realizing his wounds have been treated. He looks over to see Hero Luke sleeping by the fire. Then he turns to see bread and soup laid out for him. He tentatively picks up the bread. When he takes a bite, tears stream down his face. We then jump ahead to see Hero Luke and the reindeer hanging out, when Hero Luke names the reindeer Tony Tony Chopper. Chopper asks why that name. Hero Luke explains it's because Chopper is a Tonakai, a reindeer, and has antlers that look strong enough to chop down trees. Chopper is super happy with the name. Then Hero Luke tells him not to take what the people did to him to heart, that the country is sick, and the hearts of the people need healing. Chopper asks how he's going to heal the people, and Hero Luke tells him the tale of a man with an incurable disease that was cured when he came across the beautiful sight of cherry blossom trees. He slaps a hand on a Jolly Roger with cherry blossoms on it, and says that's why he's going to hoist this flag, as proof that there's no disease that can't be cured. Chopper doesn't understand what it means. So Hero Luke explains that the flag is a symbol of faith and that he'll fight for his beliefs like a pirate. Chopper asks what a pirate is, and Hero Luke starts boasting about them and the impossible feats they can accomplish. We then jump ahead again to see Chopper joining Hero Luke on a trip to town, where they overhear army men talking about a mushroom that might be able to cure all diseases. Once the army men leave, we get quick cuts of Hero Luke and Chopper fleeing from angry villagers before they escape back home. Chopper gets mad at Hero Luke for using him as a decoy, and the two engage in a short brawl that ends with a peace offering to Chopper in the form of a hat, which has him tearing up since it's the first gift he's ever gotten. A montage sequence begins where we see Chopper and Hero Luke going about daily life, doing experiments, escaping angry mobs, and just having a good time together. Before we know it, a year has passed, and Hero Luke releases Chopper from his care, but Chopper doesn't want to go. Hero Luke throws him out, trying to stay strong as Chopper begs to be let back in. A loud thunk makes Hero Luke open the door to see Chopper injured himself, so Hero Luke has to help him. But Hero Luke stands firm, and does the one thing he promised never to do. He shoots his gun at Chopper, finally chasing him away. Hero Luke quietly begs for forgiveness. We then cut to Hero Luke meeting with Kureha to get her help to buy himself more time to finish his cure. Chopper spies on them, and scuttles away when they catch sight of him. He storms into Hero Luke's home and flips through all of the books until he finds what he's looking for. We then cut to Chopper walking to the edge of a cliff and spotting a spotted mushroom on the other side. As he tries to figure out a way to cross, we see a herd of reindeer approach from behind. We cut back to Hero Luke doing experiments in a cleaned up home when the door slams open. He looks over to see a heavily injured Chopper holding up the spotted mushroom triumphantly. He gapes in shock as Chopper pleads for Hero Luke to live and teach him to be a doctor. Or does he think a reindeer can't be one? Hero Luke rushes forward to hug Chopper, tearfully saying he can become a doctor because he has the most important quality, a big heart. Meanwhile, Wapo orders for Hero Luke's execution. We jump ahead to Hero Luke drinking the mushroom soup. Then their attention is drawn to a flask that turns pink, which means the cure is finally done. Hero Luke and Chopper celebrate before Hero Luke has to leave for a quick trip. He makes Chopper stay to recover and says he'll become a fine doctor one day. We then see Hero Luke meeting with Kureha to give her his finished cure and beg her to teach Chopper. She refuses the request but does take the cure. However, something he said bothers her, so she goes to his home where she questions Chopper, and finds out he gave Hiruluk a poisonous mushroom thinking it would save him, because it had a skull and crossbones next to it. But Kureha berates him, saying it was a kind gesture, but kindness isn't enough to save people, that he needs knowledge and skills too. Chopper starts crying at the realization that he killed his only friend with his lacking knowledge. He then runs to the castle when Kureha tells him Hiruluk planned to make it his grave. We then cut to the outside of Wapol's castle where Hiruluk demands to see the 20 doctors so he can help them. Dalton informs him the doctors are fine as guards take aim at him with their crossbows. Hiruluk realizes the whole thing was a trap, but instead of getting mad, he's relieved that everyone's fine, much to Dalton's shock. Wapol steps forward and orders his men to kill Hiruluk, but Hiruluk says he can't be killed, giving a passionate speech about a man only truly dying when he's been forgotten. A speech that shakes Dalton, who can see how much Hiruluk cares about the people, and wonders if it's too late to save the kingdom. Hiruluk assures him that someone will continue his work, and asks him not to hurt the monster that's coming, because it's his son. He then plops down to pour himself a drink, and cheers to having lived a great life. He downs the drink, and blows himself up, just as Chopper arrives. Chopper goes to attack the men, but Dalton stops him, telling him to live for the sake of Hiruluk's will. Chopper runs away in tears. Wapol berates Dalton for letting Chopper go, and Dalton berates Wapol for what he's done to Drum Island, and that no medicine can cure stupidity. We then end the episode with Chopper begging Kureha to teach him to be a doctor as he waves Hiruluk's flag with tearful desperation. She looks at him for a beat, before telling Chopper to call her Doctorine. For episode 8, we open on Wapol arriving at the castle and being disgusted to see Hiruluk's flag instead of his own. Chopper spots him from a window and runs off down the hall. We then jump back to town where Wapol's army is defeated thanks to the Straw Hats, and the villagers can finally help Dalton. But he brushes off their hands as he has to defeat Wapol if he wants to save his country's heart. Vivi and Usopp are moved by his resolve, and decide to help carry him to the castle, though Zoro steps in to carry Dalton himself because he's too heavy for Usopp and Vivi. The villagers come along as well, ready to fight against Wapol. But first, the 20 doctors make their appearance. They're ashamed of their inaction after all these years, still remembering the sacrifice of a mad doctor, and want to start making up for it by helping Dalton. We then jump back to the castle where Chopper runs in and warns everyone that Wapol is here. Luffy, Sanji, and Kureha go outside with him, while Nami stays inside. Outside the castle, Wapol uses his Munch Munch powers to make something that'll destroy the flag. Chopper runs out, demanding he leave the flag alone. Wapol refuses, because the only flag that deserves to be on the castle is his, not some silly little Jolly Roger. He then shoots at the flag much to Chopper's despair, but Luffy springs into action and protects the flag with his body. When the smoke clears, the flag is only slightly singed. Luffy shouts that the flag is an unbreakable symbol of faith, a promise that isn't flown lightly. Someone like Wapol will never be able to understand the true meaning of the flag, so he should just shut up and go away already. This ticks Wapol off but greatly moves Chopper. Wapol orders his 2 commanders to destroy the pirates. Chopper and Sanji team up to take them out while Wapol runs into the castle with Luffy chasing after him. Inside the castle, Wapol runs into Nami, who presents herself as an innocent bystander, but Luffy ruins her plan when he shouts for her to help. The two then fight Wapol, and manage to send him flying out of the castle just as the other Straw Hats and the villagers arrive to see him go down the mountain. Luffy and Nami step outside and declare Wapol's defeat. The people celebrate, but the moment is broken by Kureha demanding that anyone who's injured go to her infirmary now or she'll make sure they get an extended stay. As everyone rushes to follow her command, We pan up to hear Luke's flag as it continues to proudly fly on top of the castle. We then jump forward a bit to see Luffy chasing Chopper around the castle grounds, demanding he join his crew while his crew watches on in amusement. Chopper refuses, because despite how much he wants to be a pirate, he can't be one because he's a reindeer and a monster, not a human. And reindeer monsters can't be pirates. But Luffy doesn't care, shouting for him to just shut up and come with them. This shocks Chopper, and makes the others shake their heads in amused exasperation, already knowing what Chopper's response will be as we cut to Chopper entering the infirmary where Kureha is checking up on Dalton. He tells her he's leaving to become a pirate, but Kureha objects, saying he's her only assistant and is also a crybaby who will end up dead on the first day. Chopper stands firm, continuing to argue his case until Kureha starts flinging knives at him. He flees in terror, but still remains firm in his resolve as Kureha chases after him. He runs out to where the Straw Hats are and tells them to get on the sleigh. They look at him in confusion, but then quickly do as he says when they see a wrathful Kureha approaching. Kureha watches them flee the mountain, and Dalton walks up to her, asking if she really wants to end things this way. Kureha nods. She doesn't like tearful goodbyes, she says while tearing up. She then goes inside to prepare for a proper send-off. We then cut to the Straw Hats aboard the ship where Chopper finds out Kureha secretly put a backpack of supplies on the sleigh. We cut back to Kureha, who loads a cannon and launches Hero Luke's cure into the sky. The boom draws the Straw Hats' attention, and they watch as the falling snow turns pink. Then they look up to see the castle mountain glowing brightly, making it look like a giant cherry blossom tree. Chopper wails at the sight of Hero Luke's dream finally fulfilled, as the hearts of Drum Island's people are healed. We then cut to Dalton and Kureha as a villager informs them of Monkey D. Luffy's bounty. Dalton asks where they got the poster, and they say someone chasing after Blackbeard asked for a message to be passed on to a boy wearing a straw hat. What's the message? That the man, Ace, will be waiting for Luffy in Alabasta for 10 days. Unfortunately, it's already too late to pass the message, but Dalton's pretty sure they'll be going to Alabasta anyways. Meanwhile, Kureha watches the ship disappear from view, and smiles as she comments on how the will of D lives on. We then jump back to the ship where the crew celebrates Chopper's recruitment. Once the festivities die down, Vivi calls for their attention. Because they're risking their lives to help her, there's something she needs to tell them. The true identity of Mr. Zero. As the crew waits for her to continue, we cut to Miss All Sunday meeting with a man she calls Mr. Zero. She informs him that pirates are attacking a nearby village. Mr. Zero says he'll go deal with them personally, and she asks if he's sure he wants to do that. Mr. Zero smiles. Of course he's sure. He's got to keep up appearances after all, because he's one of the 7 warlords and the hero of Alabasta. As he laughs sinisterly, we cut to Smoker and Tashigi in the wax house at Little Garden trying to extract data from a damaged transponder. The previous conversation comes out in bits and pieces. The only thing they can understand is that something is happening in Alabasta and it involves the Straw Hats and Baroque works. Tashigi asks what their next move is. Smoker looks over at the Baroque works agent, Mr. 11, that they have tied up and gagged in a corner. He tells her to contact HQ for an eternal log post for Alabasta, and the season comes to an end. Or something like that. Obviously this isn't a perfect rewrite, and I'm sure plenty of people can come up with something better. However, I hope I at least managed to rework the season into something enjoyable with better and more faithful story execution than the live action. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Reminder that this is just my take on how Season 2 of the One Piece live action could have gone, so whether you liked it or not, I don't mind either way, and would love to know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and comment which show you'd like me to try to rework into a better version of itself next. This is Some Random Neko, going off to take a much needed nap now. Don't forget to keep calm and just meow.